afternoon and welcome back to a new year of Science Sundays. Many of you are familiar with this series and some of you are not, so if you're not, let me tell you a little bit about it. Science Sundays is one of the premier outreach events of the College of Arts and Sciences. And we try to cover the full range of what the college covers, natural and mathematical sciences, social and behavioral sciences, and arts and humanities, specifically with connections to science. So I'm John Beacom. I'm the chair of the Science Sundays Committee. I'm from Physics and Astronomy and the Center for Cosmology and Astroparticle Physics. I represent a committee of about 8 people who chooses these talks and puts them on. And today we are honored to have one of my own colleagues from the Department of Astronomy, Professor Yuan-Sen Ting. He's been here at Ohio State for 1 year, but that's not how long we've known him. So in our Center for Cosmology and Astroparticle Physics, we run every year a thing called the Price Prize, which is a competition to identify the 2 top graduate students in the world working in astrophysics, bring them to Ohio State for about a week and have them give a talk and get to know them. What year did you come here for that?
2016 or 17?
Yeah. So he was one of our winners. And then years later, we're delighted to welcome him as one of our faculty. He's well known for his work in you might call it the stellar archaeology of the galaxy, looking around at all of the stars and trying to figure out their ages and trying to figure out how the galaxy was put together. He's also renowned as a specialist in artificial intelligence, and of course with the connections to astronomy. This year, just in his spare time of his first year, he wrote a textbook on artificial intelligence in astronomy. He's writing a review for a prestigious review journal, and he also wrote a white paper for the National Science Foundation. Just a few things he did during his first year, during his extra time. But we're delighted to have him here, both at Ohio State in our department and here in Science Sunday. So welcome back, and let's welcome him.
Can people hear me? Test, test. Can people hear me? Great. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a delighted to be here and talk to you. So as John mentioned, my name is Yuan-Sen. I am a professor here in astronomy, and most of my research is at the intersection of AI and statistics and astronomy, which is also what I want to talk to you about today. It's also how AI is changing science. And this, of course, a very exciting topic because AI, of course, has fundamentally changed how we think about science. I should also mention that most of the illustration that you will see is generated by AI. So I thought it should be fitting to have the subject today to help to present. So, of course, first, before I dive deep into the topic today, I want to define what AI is because we use the word AI so much, and sometimes it loses the meaning. So AI is actually a very big umbrella. So the goal of AI is to use computers or system to try to mimic some of the human behavior. And there are quite a lot of ways to do that. One of the successful ways that people have been exploring since the 1960s is what we call machine learning. So we try to use the vast amount of data and learn the statistical patterns of the data based on the algorithm in the computer. And in the last 10 years, among machine learning, there is a particular techniques that has stood up. It's what we call deep learning. You might have heard of the terms neural network. This turned out to be a very successful way to learn about the patterns in the data. And within the deep learning, this is a very broad field. Of course, there is this subfield called large language models. So we are building chatbot like ChatGPT to talk to human and behave like human. So most of the talk that we'll be focusing today will be at this deep core of AI, which is just the chatbot and large language models. But I also want to keep in mind that AI, of course, is a much broader field than what I will present today. So why this is a timely topic, right? Because to be honest, sometimes the modern AI can sound very scary. Right? Not scary in the sense of the Hollywood and Skynet is taking over the earth, at least not yet. But it's very scary sometimes because it can perform things that we thought to be uniquely human. So let me show you some example. So just this summer, for the first year, the AI system that we built officially won the gold medal at the International Mathematics Olympiad. So for people who are not familiar with the IMO, the International Mathematics Olympiads, so this is the most prestigious mathematics competition for the high schooler. So it's not just about doing the arithmetic extremely fast, but rather to solve really complex questions in mathematics. So the AI winning the gold medal, meaning that now in terms of mathematics, is competing with some of our best young minds internationally. But it's not only about mathematics. So at the same time, we have the IOI, the International Olympiad for Informatics. So this is testing the high schooler on their coding and programming ability. And this year, the system built by OpenAI claimed to have the 6th place in the IOI, meaning that internationally, despite all these young students have spent years to perfect their skill, only 5 of them in the world can beat the AI system. So, of course, if you want to have more quantitative numbers, people love to have the IQ test. I should start by saying that you shouldn't trust any IQ test. I think that is a very flawed way to think about human intelligence. But if you want some numbers, so you can think about in the beginning of ChatGPT, the intelligence is about 80. So this is based on some tests that people have done on the internet. And over time, it has improved about 10 points per year. So as of now, the conservative estimate of the AI, the intelligence of the AI, how smart AI is about 120 points, meaning that it's smarter than 90% of the population. So this is, of course, a very unsettling list of facts. Then this leads to the very uncomfortable question about are we doing research to plan for our own demises, right? So that's the picture that I have in mind. So maybe of course, the media will love to think that it's true. So if you go on news, you will see about startups that have raised hundreds of millions of dollars to build what they call super intelligence. You also have the news saying that there will be a bloodbath of white-collar jobs. And some people in the AI company now started to call us the human meats for the robots, right? So of course, the question is, should we be worried? I think the short answer to that question is no, not yet. And the reason is because the current ability, so despite the AI has shown some of the intellectual prowess, they are very superhuman. But at the same time, AI can also seem to be very silly at times. So just at the same time that this summer when the AI won the IMO, the International Mathematics Olympiad, we also have the first autonomous AI soccer championship, and this is the 2 of the finalists. They are kind of kicking the balls, they are falling over, you have to pull them apart. So at the same time, it's very puzzling because AI can be extremely superhuman, but also very subhuman at the same time. And this is not new, so this is known as the Moravec paradox. So even back in the 1980s, Hans Moravec, which is a computer scientist, had noted that it's quite paradoxical, but sometimes things that we think are very easy turn out to be really hard for AI. And things that we think are very hard are very easy for AI. So this is the same thing with what we see now. So AI is really good at things that we think are very hard, like mathematics, but they are still really bad at kicking a soccer, right? And why this is the case? So there is an easy explanation of why this is the case. So the way that you can think about building an AI system is trying to reverse engineer the evolution. So we have evolved for a long time. Some of the tasks that we have are evolved first, and some of the things that we do are evolved the last. But it just turned out that things that we always prize to be very human, like things that like conversational or logical like ability. These are the things that evolve the last, because this is a process in the frontal lobes, and it's only like developed for less than 1 million years. But for things that we take for granted, like how we walk, like how we like do the perception, the 3D like perception, or understanding basic like common sense that the water should flow from the top to bottom, it does not need to take a human to understand that. So even the basic like mammal have the basic like common sense and intuition that the human has. So this leads to the simple answer why the scientific like research, like despite there are lots of hype in the media, it's actually not that easy to do a end-to-end research with AI, just because the current like, ability of AI is highly uneven. Like you might say, wait a minute, right? So like even though the AI like, might not be able to kick a soccer, but of course like, most of the things that we do in science are logical like, thinking. Why can't AI do as good a job as a human? So let me show you some example here. So the AI are still like really like struggling for some of the basic tasks like beyond just the motor motion. So this is the work that is done in Princeton in 2024. So what they try to ask is how well AI can understand a scientific chart. You can think about this like the histogram or pie chart, a bar chart that we have learned how to read in high school. So even without any scientific training, a normal human can do that pretty well. So we get the data from archive, from scientific articles. And even a high schooler can get about 80% correct, meaning that if you ask which bar in the histogram is higher than the other. But AI, back then in 2024, like even the strongest system gets less than 50% correct. So again, like this is just a manifestation of the Moravec's paradox. Things that we think are very easy turn out to be like really hard for AI, and things that we think are very hard turn out to be very easy for AI. But things just get worse from here. So there is this a famous benchmark they call the ARC AGI benchmark. This is kind of like the game that I love to play as a high schooler. I know I am weird, but this is what I love to play on the phone when I was young. So the game goes as following. So if the top left is corresponding to the top right, what would be the right equivalent for the bottom panel? So for example here, if you squint for a long time, you notice that what is the difference between left and right is on the right-hand side, you color the block. And the coloring of the block is based on the instruction here. So for any blocks that have no hole, you should color code that with yellow. With one hole, you will color code that with green. With 2 holes with blue, and 3 holes with red. So this is a task that you do not require a PhD to do, like any high schooler can do like very well. In fact, like when they ask the PhD like a student to do, I actually learned from my colleagues that actually PhD students are pretty cheap. You just need to pay them like pizza, and they will do the task for you. And the human panel get about 100% correct. But guess what? Even the strongest system, the one OpenAI thing is the beginning of the super intelligence, they get about 10% correct. So even this thing that spatial reasoning that we think are very simple for human is still very difficult for AI. So this is my favorite. So I once asked AI to reproduce a design plot. So this is about real estate in Europe, and that is a cool design with a hanging human. And the AI tried to reproduce that. It's kind of correct, but like instead of a hanging man, it hung the man. And in fact, for this talk, I thought I will be able to save a week by asking AI to make the slides. So I asked AI to make some slides. You can see that the AI do an okay job, but even for things as simple as making slides, this is a very typical holistic job. It's more than just one task, but you need to understand where to put the blocks and all this coloring. And this is actually not that easy for AI. So in summary, right, so if you read news, it's very easy for a AI company to steer fear, Because if you're just focusing on some of the aspects, indeed, AI is superhuman, thinking about memorizing information or languages or complex calculation or coding. But what has not been shown much is the second part of the equation, things that are very easy for human, like spatial reasoning, visual reasoning, like understanding the context, common sense, is still very difficult for AI. So that does not mean that the field of AI for science is completely dead. We just mean that we need to be really smart to work with what we have. So instead of treating AI as a full brain with all the embodiment, you should treat AI to be a flawed human, right? So there are some blind spot of the system, and you try to help the AI to do the task. And this is what we call the agentic research, which is also one main area of my research. So meaning that we try to equip the AI with different domains, a specific tool. It's kind of like if the human has a bad eyesight, you would give them a pair of glasses. So it's the same idea. So you build the ecosystem such that the AI can do the task as much as possible. And this is indeed happening. I think this is a very exciting and booming field of research. For example, this is a Nature paper that people show that how we can build an autonomous lab for material science. There's another Nature paper here that show that how we can use the AI system to do autonomous research in chemistry. And here at OSU, my group and my collaborator, we also trying to understand what is the limit of asking the AI to help us to do science. So in particular, we have built a systems of using the chatbot as an agent to try to analyze the data from the James Webb Space Telescope. So as an astronomer, we are blessed by a lot of data. So routinely, we are collecting millions and billions of sources. And the game, quite often, is to try to triage the system and try to find the few objects that are interesting. And to find the interesting object is more than just the classical programming. So you need to have some form of reasoning. And in the past, we tried to ask the human to do that, but that is not a very effective way to do that when we have billions and billions of sources. So what we have shown is that for this simple task, actually the AI system can handle quite well. So you can sift through the many millions of sources and try to find what could be an outlying sources that we should follow up with. But I should also mention that doing this type of research, the agentic research, is really an exercise of frustration. So on the one hand, sometimes the AI will behave like the most brilliant PhD student that you have ever encountered. But the other day, you behave like a 5-year-old toddler that will not be able to follow your instruction. So that is to say that this idea of self-driven lab, I think it's a very exciting idea, but it's also important to mention that most of this research is definitely still in the early days and is still very limited. So it works when you have a very specified goal. For example, in the case, we try to find some interesting sources from the James Webb Space Telescope. It's not a very holistic job. It's a single task, and you try to let the AI to do the jobs. So my message for this part is that we should be very enthusiastic about AI. I think there are lots of reasons why we think we can expedite the scientific discovery, but not the hypes. So don't buy into sort of the AI company give you the doomsday view. I think that is far from being truth. But you shouldn't also expect a miracle from AI. So that is to say that to have a fully self-driven research is very difficult, but it does not negate the fact that as a co-pilot, so as AI as an assistant, has really been changing how we do science drastically. So even though doing a fully autonomous science is difficult, but just using them as an assistant is very fruitful. And just take myself as an example, I think the way that I do research now is very different even compared to 2 years ago. Just to walk you through a little bit things that I didn't do 2 years ago, but now I do. For example, when I wake up every day, I have like a lot of paper to read. In the past, I can choose 1 or 2 paper to read. But now instead of choosing 1 or 2 paper to read, I will ask the AI to do the summaries for me. So not only it can do the summary, it can make mind map, it can make podcasts, it can make videos about the summary of the paper. So this is done with the Google's Notebook LM. So if you have not tried that before, I will encourage you to try. But we'll show you one of the examples of the podcast now. Just a very short part of that.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're casting our gaze upward, not just at the familiar constellations, but at some truly enigmatic cosmic residents. Imagine the night sky filled with stars, but a few just, well, they don't quite fit. They're peculiar, almost defying our expectations. We're plunging into the mystery of carbon-deficient giants.
That's right. These are stars that...
Right. So you get an idea. So this is completely AI generated. And of course, I asked it to make a very layman summary. If you are an expert in the room, you can also make it to make a more technical summary. Interestingly, the wild part is that this is a static version. In the online version, you can actually join the conversation. So not only you have the 2 AI hosts, you can jump in at any time, and you can have a discussion with these two AI hosts. So this is how I usually try to get as much information in the morning as possible. That will take a long time in the past. In the afternoon, this is also the way that I have been doing my research is also different now, because I would estimate that about 85 or 90% of my codes are now written by AI. So it does not mean that it's perfect, right? So it needs some supervision, but quite often I just need to tell, this is my idea, can you implement that? Of course, it always makes a mistake, but you can also correct them and work alongside with that. So this is what we call vibe coding, and this will drastically take away quite a lot of chore that we need to do as a scientist, but now you can expedite that and focus on things that are still very difficult for AI, like creativity and identify the important question. Of course, this supercharging science, of course, leads to a big topic that we have to tackle, which is on education, right? So because the way that I have been doing science is different, so we should also prepare the student to do the science in a way that we are doing science now. So meaning that the format of science, the education need to change and also adapt quite drastically. So I should emphasize that I am saying the format of the education. I don't think the purpose of education has changed. Exactly because AI is not all-knowing, it's still very weak in some of the area. So you want to train the student to be the expert in the field. So they are creative, they are able to intuitively understand what is the problems, and just something that feels wrong in the research. So this is something that we still need to teach the student. But just being expert in the field is no longer sufficient, because you are competing with people that actually, like myself, that are using AI to do science. So you also need to be extremely AI literate. So this is something that I have been trying to implement more and more in my classroom. So for example, last semester when I am teaching the computational astronomy, I also make a AI tutor. You can think about this as a hologram of myself. So I inject my lecture note and my lecture so that the student can interact with the hologram after the classroom. So ask personalize a question and get a personalized answer. And this semester when I am teaching the coding for scientists, I also have implemented more and more AI administered quiz. So we let the AI to interview the student, so to speak, to identify some of their shortcoming, understanding what is the logical flaw in their understanding, and try to work with them. And this is a particularly important skill, because I think one of the most important skills to teach the student now is to be able to think critically about the output of AI. Exactly because AI is not perfect, the student need to be skeptical about the output of AI. Just like the students are always skeptical about the human professor, the same idea should also be applied rigorously to AI. But it's more than just AI is helping the students. So one of the things that I am teaching now in my courses for coding is to let students learn how to build tools for AI, because we have seen that AI has many shortcomings, and some of that can be mitigated when you build an ecosystem and let them to interact with the ecosystem. So we are also teaching the student not as a passive consumer of AI, but try to build tools for AI. So that is the good part. Of course, for anything that has such a drastic effect, it always have a lot of the ripple effects. So as you can tell, I am a hopelessly optimist about AI, but even I cannot admit that there will be a loss of the ripple effects. The obvious one, as we mentioned, is the changing landscape of work. So I don't think the hype about the doomsday view is correct, but it certainly is changing the landscape of work quite a lot. Right, so even at the university, we can see that there is a report of upticks for blue-collar jobs and more dropout from the university. And when I was preparing this talk, I came across this work that came out last week from Stanford. I like the title of the paper. It's called The Canaries in the Coal Mine. So for the younger people, this is in the old day, when you try to see if there's any toxic gas in the underground, you drop a canary, and then to see if there's any toxic gas. So what this paper reported is that if you think about software developer as the canary, we already started to see the effect. So what they are plotting here is the employment rate as a function of years. And the different lines here show you the different age groups. So they see that even though the senior software developer are still being higher, but more and more like a junior software developer have trouble to find jobs. And the reason that they identify why this is the case is exactly what we just mentioned, is the Moravec's paradox. So for the senior developer, because they have more experience, they have more insights, they have more understanding of the system, feeling what is right or wrong, and those skills are still quite hard to replace. But for a young graduate, for a junior software developer, because they have more codified knowledge, quite often they are asked to write a tutorial, make a certain code. Those very piecemeal and bite-sized tasks is very easy to be replaced. So I am certainly not minimizing this problem. I don't have one solution for that. But I just want to point out that this is as much a testament to the ability of AI, but it's also a testament to how we have been structuring our economy in the last century. Right? Because of Taylorism, in the last century, in the name of making things more efficient, we have tried to break things down into more standardized, bite-sized pieces, such that individual people can work on the individual pieces. But inevitably, this is also making the job much more easy to be replaced by AI, because this is more bite-sized, and therefore the AI can learn that particular task. But noting this problem, so I think that is a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. So I would hope to believe that because of the onslaught of AI, in the future we will design jobs that are more humanistic and more holistic, meaning that you're doing more parts of the jobs, so that even though you can augment by AI, but you're still doing the job yourself. And what is such job? One job is being a scientist. Because exactly what we have seen, the scientist is by definition a very holistic job. You are looking at many, you call for many different abilities of humans, and many of that are still not mastered by the AI yet. Right, so we talk about education, we talk about the employment, and we're also saying that we should supercharge the student by making them more efficient with the helps of AI. But this leads to perhaps a more deeper philosophical question that I also grapple with, which is the identity. So what makes a scientist a scientist? To understand this problem, one can look back to the ancient philosophical paradox called the ship of Theseus. So the story goes that Theseus which is a Greek god, has a ship. I'm not sure why he has a ship, but he has a ship, and the ship is on the harbor, and for some reason, it's just on the harbor. And of course, over time, the ship gets old, and some of the plank rots. So, and then the maintenance has to replace the plank one at a time. The philosophical puzzle is at what point you can no longer tell that you can no longer call the ship to be the original ship. So this is the problem that we often face in science. Just think about you are writing a scientific work. How much of AI help can you use such that you can no longer claim the work to be yours? Is it just doing the grammatical check? What if the AI do the analysis for you? What if the AI write the introduction and conclusion for you? So at what point this work will cease to be your own work? Again, I don't have an answer to that, but I think that requires some societal consensus. But I do have a personal story to tell. So the simple way, some people will say, why not we just ban the use of AI? First of all, this is completely untenable, and also it's ill-defined and futile. So give you one example that I recently faced that turned out to really show this case. So John just mentioned that I wrote a textbook. This is also in the public domain. It's 700 pages. If you guys have insomnia, you can read the textbook. So I put this on public. I didn't thought I want to publish it with a publisher because I want more people to read the textbook. But a publisher picked it up and is interested to publish it. So that's good. So we have a chat until the reviewer from the publisher came back and said, hey, actually this textbook has a very high AI score. I understand why this is the case, because even though I write the entire textbook myself, at the end I do ask AI to clean up the languages, because I think it would be unethical to let my Chinglish to be written in the textbook. I wouldn't make a very explicit disclaimer that this is what I did. But what really annoyed me is that the reviewers say, this textbook read too much like the tone of a typical American professor. And I say, well, I'm not sure, right? So that is the problem. So I am pretty annoyed, but also this leads to a more profound question. So at what point I can call this textbook mine, and at what point I cannot call this textbook mine? So doing science, there are lots of aspects, and more this aspect will be replaced by AI. And in fact, we are encouraging students to do that. But this is more than just my textbook, right? So you think about this has a broad implication to a lot of our definition of merits and achievement. So when you have a PhD applicants, you know the essay is augmented by AI. The research that they did in undergrad is also co-created by AI. How do you judge such a work? This is a thing that we have to grapple with more and more in the near future. So, but there is also a silver lining. I think the challenges of defining the identity is what actually AI is designed to do. Because if you look at the old days, people always nowadays think about AI as a tool to help us to do more works. But this is not the purpose of AI. If you go back to the old days of Alan Turing, or even the inception of the idea of the computer science is not about building tools. It's to build a mirror. So we try to understand by try to mimic the human intellect. We can understand ourselves better. So what constitute consciousness, what constitute knowledge, and so forth. And in fact, the progress of AI is so fast that it opened up many new scientific areas that we couldn't think of in the past. To give you an example, in the social science now, so there is a field called computational social science. So what they do now is that they are building a virtual town and put AI into the virtual town and observe how they interact. And if you think about this, like if you have watched the HBO series, it's kind of like the Westworld. You try to understand human behavior, how to understand how like consensus come to place, how the gossip like diffuse. All these things is very unethical to do that on human, but with AI now we can do such an experiment. But there's also like a big field that I am like very excited with. John also mentioned that I wrote the white paper with a bunch of people to talk about the future of AI and in mathematical science and mathematical and physical sciences. So this is the blueprint for the NSF. Is supported by the NSF. And one of the highlights, so this is 84 pages. Again, if you can't sleep, that is another reading. But one of the highlights of the white paper is to highlight the importance of science of AI. It's not using only AI as tool, but try to understand the science behind AI. And we do have a historical analog of that. That will be steam engines. So steam engines operate way before we understand the law that drive the steam engines. Steam engines was just very useful, but over time, by understanding steam engines, we have developed the laws of thermodynamics. We have developed the ideas of entropy, and those things are still very useful in a broad range of science today. So we believe AI is just exactly like the steam engines. So it might seem to be a black box now, but there are lots of reasons to believe that we should be able to understand to some extent what is happening in that black box. And by understanding that black box, we can start to understand what is intelligence and ourselves. So that is almost what I want to talk about today, just to take a step back a little bit. So what we have learned today. So there are a few take-home messages that I hope that you can take home with you. One is that the advancement of AI is really a humbling lesson. A lot of things that we prize to be very human turn out to be not that hard to imitate. Lots of things that we award like human for turn out to be the easiest thing to be a substitute. But there's also a beautiful flipping side of this lesson, which is that a lot of things that we take for granted turn out to be extremely hard to do. The way that we can navigate the physical world effortlessly, the common sense that we have, the instinct, the intuition. And those things are still a computational marvel. I promise that this is the last time I will show this. But of course, all this excitement, we also need to temper the excitement a little bit, just because it also has created a lot of problem that we need to come to a consensus in the near future. From understanding how do you educate students to tackle the replacement of employment, even something like what makes you you, the identity, the achievement, all these are being questioned now exactly because of AI. But I am, again, a hopeless optimist. I remember I grew up at the time, I played chess, and I remember a time when I grew up and the computer system first beat human in chess. And there was a lot of pessimism. I was told that I shouldn't play chess anymore. Why would you play chess if you are guaranteed to lose? But I think that's not the point of playing chess, right? So 3 decades after Deep Blue beat Gary Kasparov, I would argue that chess is more vibrant than ever, because through this system, we are able to play the game in a deeper insights. And we do that not because we want to, for the certainty of winning or not winning, but we do that because of the joy of doing that. So I think in many ways, science is exactly like chess. We do that just because we want to do that. And through that lens, I think AI will never be the scientist that we think it will be. I'm not saying that AI will not reach the level that it start to fill in all these blind spots and become more and stronger and stronger. But ultimately, it has no intention to understand the universe. It has no yearning to understand the world around the AI. But we do. We do science because we want to understand the world around us. I think this agency and curiosity to want to understand the world around us is very beautifully, uniquely human. So with that, I hope to leave you with optimistic notes. I am personally very excited to see how, where this will take us and how AI will continue to revolutionize how we do science in the near future. Thank you.
All right, so we probably have some questions for Professor Ting. Go ahead, sir, just shout it out.
Elon Musk, bioengineering, making people walk.
Yes, so
Repeat the question. Yeah.
So what we call the embodiment like AI, which is making human-like robots, is a very big field. But one also need to notice that most of these AI currently are still doing single tasks. Right? If you ask the robot, it's really not at the level of human. So if this is the design to do cooking, it will become better and better and doing the cooking. But it's never at the level, at least now, at the level that the human operates. And this is just a simple thing about flipping a pen. But thinking about things like intuition and spatial reasoning, those things are still really far off. So it's very easy to highlight one thing that AI do well, especially with a loss of training. But this is still a very difficult task. Yeah.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay. One question. When do you think that AI will be reasoning capable?
I think to
Try to repeat the question.
yeah. So the question is about when does the AI will become capable of reasoning. So I think the problem here is that the words reasoning is very ill-defined here. So to some extent, the AI now is doing some reasoning. If they can solve really hard math question, they are doing some reasoning. But by the same time, we can also say some of the common sense that we have is also a reasoning. So AI is doing part of the reasoning, but to do a full scale of reasoning, we are still quite far from a full human reasoning.
Let's see. Young man, go ahead.
So, does AI have a future in critical systems like nuclear reactors, power grids?
Yeah. So I think that is actually an easier question. So
Repeat the question.
Oh, sorry. I keep doing that. So the question is, does AI has a future in some of these control system like the nuclear system and power grid? Though it actually is easier for machine learning. So that's not in the realm of what we discussed today. So there is another topic that we call reinforcement learning, which is exactly try to learn from data and doing experimental control. And that is, if you think about this, that is a optimization problem. It's not about reasoning, it's just that we have too many variables. So one of the biggest breakthrough, I think, last year or the year before is we are using AI to help us to do the nuclear fusion. And the challenge there was that there are too many variables. It's a whack-a-mole, right? There are too many variables, but AI is really good at controlling many variables. So in that sense, AI in the machine learning sense is helping us to do those experimental control. In fact, just this week, there is a paper in Science that showed how we can help to optimize the detection of a gravitational wave for the same reason. So they're also using the technique called reinforcement learning.
Alex, can you raise the house lights just a little bit? Let's see. Ma'am.
What's your opinion about AI and using it in medical applications, like for claims?
Yeah.
It's a big thing now.
Yeah. So.
Repeat the question.
Oh, so the question is about.
Humans can't be trained.
Yeah, I cannot be trained. Yeah. So the question is about what do I think about the usage of AI in medical consultants. That is a very difficult question. So I can see the pro and cons. I can lay out the pro and cons. That is pretty obvious because not many people have the access to very high quality medical helps, and some of the AI can fill in that place. But there's also a danger that because the AI system is doing a lot of regurgitation, and therefore there are lots of danger about, we call out of a distribution extraction. So when the example is out of the distribution, how do we deal with that? This is the same problem why the auto driving cars still face troubles. Actually, it speaks to a lot of the problem that we try to solve now in AI, which is the system that we are doing is extremely good at interpolation, but for generalization is still like a bit weak. It's doing something. So that is, I think all people has to be educated and make their own decisions. So that is my opinion, right? So I think people are free to use the system as part of their information, but that is provided that they also understand the AI system is not infallible. It is just like last week I just asked how to lose weight. Ask AI and give me a meal plan. I think it makes sense, and I would rather just talk to AI have roughly a meal plan. I think that because I feel like I do fully trust AI system, but it's just a part of the information that I can have. I think that is where we are heading. So it's more important to let the general public to be more AI literate, so you know that when to be skeptical, when you can use that as part of the information.
Let's try this side of the room. Go ahead. Boy, Blaze.
About AI regulation, is it like computational thresholds or parameters you consider when we're trying to make some regulation around it?
So now I am trained. So to repeat the question, so the question is, in terms of the regulation, should we have more like cap on the computation? Oh, wow. People asking the big question that I have absolutely no rights and rule to make any decision. I can also just play the devil advocate on both sides. I think there is reason to be skeptical. So there's reason to regulate in the sense that we also know, at least with the current models, the bigger models are stronger, and therefore as you use more compute, it turns out to be more powerful. But at the same time, because exactly we do not know what is going on in the AI system, and on a weekly basis, people in the science of AI still come up with interesting understanding of the system that we thought is trivial. So the argument for having some regulation is exactly because we don't fully understand it, and we want to be careful. But also there is an argument to not regulate that just because sometimes the performance is not highly correlate with the model size. So just having a cap on the compute does not seem to be very effective as well.
Go ahead, sir.
How are the problems of, and it may not be the same as it is in ChatGPT as it's used commonly, problems of hallucination and bias built into the system?
Right. Yeah. So the
problem in using science.
Yeah. So the question is, of course, in this chatbot, we all know that there is a built-in biases and hallucination. Would that be a problem for science? That is absolutely a problem for science. That's exactly why for the same reason, we need to make AI, human more AI literate. Just meaning that you need to understand. Again, right? So we don't even fully trust human. Why would you fully trust AI? That is some of the things that I always puzzle me. I think part of this is cultural because we have grew up to have the classical machine, and we have thought that the machine is reliable. It will do the same thing all the time. But I think the current AI system, you should really treat them more like human in some sense than a classical machine. Just like you will be very skeptical about your professor, the same thing should be applied to AI. I think that is a cultural shift that we need, meaning that the student need to be less skeptical because there will be no way to make the AI system to be fully foolproof. Just like there's no way to make a human fully reliable.
Let's take a question. It's students of any age. Go ahead, young man.
Yes, what do you think the AI potential is for cybersecurity?
So the question is about what is the potential of AI in cyber security. That is, again, a very loaded question because it's really both the devil and the angel are advancing in a the rocket speed, because now you can both attack and defend based on the AI system. Yeah, I think just like the classical like cyber security, when the bad guy gets stronger, the Spider-Man need to get stronger. Same idea. Yes. Yeah.
Let's see. Sir.
Some years ago, one of the scientists here, I think his name was Ken Wilson, talked about how computers could be used to predict chemicals.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell us more about how AI is now helping
Yeah.
in the area of chemistry.
Yeah, so repeat the question. I am trained. Okay, so the question is how AI is like helping to do the chemical research, and this is definitely a successful story of AI, but not necessarily in the context of what we discussed today. So we are talking about chatbot and agents. There's another line of study. So this is why I say that AI is a very big umbrella. So the things that people have been doing now is like asking AI to make sort of like some proposal on the proteins. So this is still like generative models, just like the chatbot is generating like sentences. In that case, they are generating like molecules. So you say, I want to have certain molecules, what would be the best proposal? And people have seen that has some like successes compared to the human benchmark, meaning that comparing to the classical way of doing that, the success rate of being able to find the useful like molecules is higher than the classical way. But I should also caution that this is not my line of study, but I did talk to some colleagues that are in those regime. It's improving, but we are talking about a small improvement, right? So meaning that any molecules or proteins that is being predicted by the AI is not necessarily means that it's correct. People still do experiment to verify that. Just like in the past, you might need to do 10 experiments. Now you need to do 9 or 8. That is a gain. That's certainly a direction that is doing. People really hope to get to the stage that wherever the AI can propose, we are down to 2 candidates, and we can find one of them. But we are not there yet. But it's definitely helping. So this is very similar to what we do for the James Webb's data. We are not saying that wherever the AI proposed is the one that will find discovery, but it has a higher chances to find discovery. So it's the optimization problem.
Let's take a few more questions, but Tanya.
Hey.
Great talk. So continuing maybe from a previous question and your comment that science is a fundamentally human endeavor to understand the world around us.
Yeah.
So far, AI has been pretty good at kind of speeding up, sweeping the space of possible solutions, whether it's proteins or materials or the images of galaxies.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on AI as a partner in the scientific process of generating testable hypotheses? Yeah,
so that is a big question. I also thought about that. Repeat the question. Forgetting. Should really have an AI companion. Sure. So the question is, what do I think about? So we have been using AI to generate proposal about molecules and galaxy, but what about hypothesis? My opinion is that there is a lot of hypes in that argument. Or lots of people are saying that we can use large language models to come up with good ideas. There is some truth to that. I think AI can help us to come up with good ideas. I practically talk to AI more than I talk to colleagues. But I think the challenges of the self-driven lab is never lies in the hypothesis generation. The reason that why the self-driven lab is difficult is that it's very hard to close the loop. So take the example of astronomy. It's very easy for AI to say, we think, so we still do not know what dark matter and dark energy is. It's completely reasonable the AI can come up with some proposal what dark matter and dark energy is. But that is not the key point. The key point here is that once they make the proposal, do you have the system to run the simulation? Do you have the system to compare with the data? And this is why material science and chemistry is moving much faster in that space, exactly because their experiment is much easier to do, so to speak, because they are more finite. So think about astronomy. When we have a proposal, we need to run, hundreds of millions of CPU hours. So it does not matter if AI come out with 10 ideas, because we are still limited by how fast we can do the experiment. So I think that this is another regime that I think there are some truth to that, but we also need to guard against the hype of hypothesis generation. This is why I focus on a lot of what we call AI for science. To do a end-to-end research really comes down to the groundworks, not about just coming up with ideas, but how do you build the ecosystem to have an end-to-end research. And then you see it's very hard to control AI because they just stumble like everywhere. Yeah.
For the last question, let's prioritize a student question again. There we go, young man.
Thanks for the talk. I think holistic jobs do not fit the 9-to-5 job schedule.
Mm-hmm.
It needs more like human interactions. And like how are we gonna go in the society as 9-to-5 jobs is not gonna be around because of AI, and then it's gonna be
Right.
scattered, random, and it's gonna change the
Right.
9-to-5 jobs.
Yeah, so repeat the question. So the question is about whether or not AI will change the 9-to-5 schedule. Let's just making sure I understand. You are worried that there might not be enough job to do 9-to-5, or there will be too many jobs to do.
People, for example, say universal basic income to compensate the
Right.
amount of hours instead of
Right. Right. Oh boy. The question is about whether or not AI will change the job schedule 9-to-5, and the question about the basic income. I think this is tied to the employment issue, and also definitely beyond my pay grade to answer this question. But I will make a comment that the same worry has always been promoted whenever we have a new technology. So whenever we have a computer, people say that we will not have enough jobs. How do we have enough jobs to feed all the human? Or when we have a robots, the robots are taking away the jobs. I think this is not to minimize the current drastic shift of the landscape of jobs, but the human has always the history that we will always find something to do. And the more technology that we have just means that the more thing that we will do. For example, I'm using more and more AI. Does that mean that my work hour decreases? No, it just means that I write 2 times more paper. So that has happened. I think that is so this is why we believe that it can expedite some of that. But of course, it also leads to the potential of making things more pleasurable in jobs, because you are doing things that are less tailorized. You are doing jobs that are more big picture. I think that is sort of the optimistic view that I have. I think there will be challenges to move to that new reality, but when all this has settled, I think we'll find ourselves that our job to be more pleasurable.
I think that's a great place to end. Before we thank Professor Ting, let me remind you that we'll have a reception upstairs in the traditions room. Have a cup of coffee. You have a chance to ask him questions. If somebody dragged you here today and this is your first time, welcome. You can join the email list. You'll get 1 email a month and find out about these events. And let's thank Professor Ting.